Good evening. My name is Paul Purvis. Those of you that are part of our Mission Hill family, you know that. But tonight we're joined with many others because this is a very special evening. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a second, but let's do this. Let's start this evening in a word of prayer. Would you pray with me? So, Father, again, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we just thank you because today, in your sovereignty, you chose to give us breath in our lungs. And we want to have stewarded that well as we draw to the close of this day. So thank you for life. God, we gather as the church, and so we are gathering also celebrating in common the new life that we have in you. And Lord, because of that gospel, we recognize that the gospel not only assures our entrance into eternity with you, but it gives us the power in this life to make a difference. You tell us that we have that same resurrection power that can be utilized for your glory, even as we weave that into our stories. And so, God, I thank you for that reality, and I thank you for how tonight we're going to see how each of us can work together and partner together to make a difference, even in our dark world. So we thank you. God, please be honored in this time. Thank you for the new friends that we're going to meet. Thank you for those that are joining us, not only here in person, but those that are joining us through the Mission Hill family online and even around this country. So God, be honored in this time, and we ask this in the mighty name of Jesus the Christ. Amen. Well, normally on Wednesday nights at Mission Hill, we gather in what's called House of Prayer, and we spend time just praying, worshiping, and we usually celebrate communion together. But tonight we've got a unique opportunity, and we're partnering with our friends at One More Child. You may be familiar for the difference that One More Child is making around the world, and at Mission Hill, we have been excited to be a partner with One More Child in a lot of different ways. In fact, my life was probably forever changed after one of our partnership events with One More Child several years ago, as it led us to adopt a precious little girl to come into our family and to make a destiny difference for her. Tonight you're going to hear about some ways that you can help make destiny difference. We're excited in Tampa to be hosting the Super Bowl in what we're now calling Title Town, since we seem to have the best sport teams in every sport. But we're excited to be the first home team ever to be in the Super Bowl in our city. But we recognize in the midst of that excitement, there's some deep challenge. Many of you know that the Super Bowl and the events surrounding that have become one of the biggest days for what we call human trafficking in our modern world. And so our partnership with One More Child tonight is coming alongside and seeing how we can be involved in making a difference and hearing what is being done to make a difference in this area of human trafficking. Now, if you're part of the Mission Hill family, remember, we're always wanting to do whatever it takes, wherever we are, to shine with that light and love of Jesus, just like that city on a hill. And one way we're doing that is clarifying the win on a special day that we've had for at least a decade, 10 years. That's Super Bowl Sunday. We've always celebrated that, but usually it's been the way churches typically celebrate the win. That's with high attendances and looking at big parties together. COVID has changed that. So as we begin to think about how we could celebrate the win, one of the things we did as a church is to partner with One More Child and to come together and provide encouragement bags for those that may be involved and can be ministered to in this heinous act of human trafficking. So if you're part of our church family, make sure you check online and you tune in this weekend to see how you can be a part of making a difference, encouraging through this ministry. But tonight, you've got some experts here. And so I'm going to turn it over to them, beginning with Jackie Callaway. You may know her from ABC Action News for the last, I think, 20 years or so. 18, we don't want to rush it, but making a difference. And one of the things that God has used her to do, because she is a person of faith, very active in her church, but God has used her to help bring to light some things that need to have the light shone on. So would you do me a favor, here in the room and wherever you are, would you welcome Jackie Callaway? Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. It's an honor to be here. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I thought, boy, God sure has brought things full circle. A couple of years ago, Micah, who I'll introduce in a moment, came to my small group Bible study class, and she talked about the problem of human trafficking and sex trafficking and child sex trafficking in the Tampa Bay and greater Tampa area. And I took that back. I'm part of the investigative team at ABC Action News. I took that back to my executive producer, and I said, as a team, we could tackle all aspects of that, and we did. It ended up 9 months of work, and it culminated in a 30-minute special. It's up on our website. But that, to me, was absolutely a God thing. And him putting Micah into my life, him putting me into a role of a journalist so that we were able to shine a bright light, just like the bright lights of the Super Bowl are shining on Tampa Bay. A lot of people are just seeing the shine and the glimmer and the glint, and a lot of people aren't seeing the darkness. We've already my team has talked to the FBI. We've met with Tampa police. They say they have no doubt they're already seeing a spike. They say they have no doubt that there are going to be more sex traffickers bringing women, primarily women, into town, and some possible children, teenagers, into town and marketing them online just for the Super Bowl. So I'm so thankful to be here tonight. I want to introduce this panel of just amazing people. Starting on my right, this is Keith Babb. He is the director of Hope Street, One More Child. Keith, thank you. It's an honor to meet you in person. I've been hearing about you over the years.
I'm glad to be here.
And then, of course, Lynn Hicks. She's the executive director of Anti-Trafficking at One More Child. We're going to be hearing a lot more from these panelists. Over here to my left is Michael Wazinski. She is the chief operating officer of the United States Institute Against Human Trafficking. We've done some work with her agency, just fantastic. And I'm a big, big fan of our final panelist, Tara Knaus. She's the director of Loft 181 at One More Child, and just really doing God's work, all of these people. Want to kick it off right now with Krista. I know that you've got some things that you want to talk to us about the work that's being done and what exactly human trafficking is.
Absolutely. Thank you. You know, it's great to start off with just a coming together of understanding what is human trafficking and specifically what is sex trafficking, because that's what we're talking about that is just greatly increases during any major event, but especially the Super Bowl. Sex trafficking, by federal definition, is when force, fraud, or coercion are used to get someone into any type of commercial sex act. That's for over the age of 18. That means for adults, force, fraud, or coercion are present to get someone, and it can be anywhere from, pornography. You see trafficking in strip clubs. It can be online. And so it's not narrowed down to just specifically what we would have historically thought of as prostitution. It can be any sex act. Under the age of 18, our federal government, very rightly and beautifully so, says that force, fraud, and coercion do not need to be present. That's, a much needed change that came about. If a minor child cannot consent to sex with an adult without it being statutory rape, then how can they consent to sell sex to an adult? And so in the case of minors, any sex act with a minor child is trafficking. And we look at the Super Bowl and all the events that come to our cities and our towns, and children are pursued. Teenagers, preteens, they are pursued. They will be at greater risk than other times, although year-round they're at risk. And at One More Child, anti-trafficking, we work year-round to face that risk, to provide direct services that meet the needs, and we always need the community. But at a time like the Super Bowl, this is more of a need than ever.
Krista, appreciate that. I think a lot of people don't know what the exact definition is, and it's so right. That was one of the things we had worked on in the past, is that if you're a child, you cannot consent to your own rape, and you are absolutely sold for sex if someone has collected money. Keith, I want to start with you. Boy, you're just playing a vital role down there on Hope Street, and I wanted to ask you, we all know that, we all hear about the increase in sex trafficking and the sex traffickers wanting to cash in, but how does this time of year, how do these events make the most vulnerable even more vulnerable to this crime?
I think one of the sad realities with large-scale events like the Super Bowl is that they provide the appropriate cover for those that traffic victims. A lot of times our awareness or of these matters are covered because of the excitement of certain events like the Super Bowl. But it can be an excruciating time, especially for victims. And even in the simplest terms, whenever traffickers see large-scale events with people they see profit. And then victims become products. And I think that becomes the most difficult thing when you talk about events like Super Bowls. And then you couple that with partying, you couple that with alcohol, you couple that with the drug usage that many times these events bring, and then it creates a breeding ground for trafficking to take place. I think the next piece that you have, especially with large-scale events such as this, is that you have temporary work opportunities. And when you think about communities, especially communities that are ravaged by poverty, these provide disingenuous opportunities that traffickers will set up for individuals in impoverished communities that think these are opportunities for gainful employment, an opportunity to make money, and because they're not always aware of these strategies of traffickers, it then becomes, again, a breeding ground for trafficking. It's a sad reality, but traffickers see people as profit, victims become products. And then when you couple it with all these other factors in terms of the partying and the other events, and also these opportunities for traffickers to mass opportunities for money, especially for those who are impoverished, it creates a breeding ground for trafficking.
So interesting, so well said, thank you. Tara, I'm so excited because I've been able to see the work that you do, and for those that don't know, at Loft 181 is Hope for One More Child. She is providing clothing and services to kids that are in foster care, and it's pretty amazing when you actually go to the Loft and see the transformations that are taking place there. It really is, you really walk into that place and feel God's presence. You actually are working closely and personally with these young people, these minors, mostly girls, that are already vulnerable. They're in foster care. They're vulnerable to traffickers, to being preyed upon. And I know I've talked about this with a lot of other people and with victims, survivors. They say that low self-esteem kept them down and was one of the ways that the traffickers were able to convince them that the trafficker was actually almost like a savior. Talk to me about what you've seen and how that actually works.
Thanks, Jackie. So I run a clothing store for teenage girls in foster care, and you're exactly right. It's a very vulnerable population. They already feel different. They already feel isolated. They feel alone. And I think that feeling is exploited, and they're very vulnerable to attach unhealthily to different individuals that want to do them harm. And so our goal at Loft is we give clothes away for free where girls will come shopping. But more importantly than that, our desire is to give away hope and also to give away the message of Jesus. And really to tell girls, like, you are important and you have value. And I'm so sorry people in your life from a very young age haven't seen that value, but that does not make you any less valuable. And so we get to share that message, and hopefully through clothes it boosts their self-esteem, but more importantly, we desire to keep them in school and hopefully be in their life continually while they're in foster care, even when they age out of foster care and they need clothes for job interviews. For good, healthy, paying jobs. And so that's where we step in and are more on the prevention side. But we do have girls that come from safe houses, and sometimes I meet people immediately over at Loft when girls are rescued and they come in with very little or wearing hardly anything. And so we're able to meet an immediate need.
That was my next question. How do you determine what their needs are, and what steps do you take to try to give them some sort of armor or educate them about their vulnerabilities to being trafficked?
Well, one, we just try and infuse them with truth. We get to speak to that and speak, just life into them. They come shopping for about an hour, hour and a half, and so we get that time to just share, and we get to listen to their stories. And I think that's really important, is they need to feel validated. And I sat with a girl not that long ago, and I just cried with her. I really had no words. Honestly, what do you say? I can't fix it. But the Bible's clear. It says, weep with those who weep. And so I just cried with her. And she said, this is the very first time anybody's ever cried for me. But I said, oh no, this is the second time. Jesus has not wasted, he has seen every single one of your tears. But let me be the first here to cry with you. And so sometimes it's just a matter of infusing life and hope, and then also just telling them, you know what, we believe in you. You are not alone. That is one of the biggest lies I think girls believe from a young age, is that you are the only one. And we want to tell them that is not true. There are people, we are for you. We are with you. We desire better for you.
I love that, Tara, thank you. Krista, I just want to come back to you. The interactions from Loft 181, it seems like there's multiple resources. Why is the continuum of care so very important with the at-risk youth? And how have you managed to, how has One More Child managed to kind of create that continuum of care and walk side beside these children who have so many needs?
Great question. The continuum of care is critical to not just the healing process, but also to staying out long term. You know, it's not often that trafficking happens in some isolation or silo. These are years worth of vulnerabilities that lead up to a youth or young adult being trafficked, and the continuum of care helps us to stand beside them in all the ways of decreasing the vulnerabilities. And so we have our safe home for minor girls, a critical piece, but it's, you know, in the scope of the years that you will engage in healing from the trauma of being trafficked and the traumas that happened previously, that's just this one small piece. And, you know, the rest of the continuum of care does involve not only our direct services, it involves clinical services, and survivor mentors are a huge piece through our mobile crisis teams. They will stand beside and be a mentor and an encouragement all the way up till 24, and then we will refer them and plug them in with adult services in their community. But we also need other organizations. We need teachers, we need the school system to partner with us, we need youth groups and churches and youth centers and places like Hope Street. Hope Street is a critical component in any community that, you know, the 2, maybe 3 times a week we will interact with youth, not in our safe home, but one on our mobile crisis teams. That's nothing compared to the 24 hours a day. And so we're really building support by partnering within each community and providing the wraparound direct services that are necessary.
For people who are listening,
Yes.
people who may be able to come alongside and partner,
Yeah.
what can they do to help?
Yeah. First, you can really just start to give some time and some prayer to what that continuum of care looks like. We have a video that we would like you to watch and just rest in that. Try to leave here tonight and be just praying over what you learned through this video, and then we'll talk more about what you can specifically do.
This is a story about a 17-year-old in our care. She's had a history of brokenness and hurt, like other girls in our care. For confidentiality purposes, we'll call her Carrie. This is her story.
I'm going to share a client case today. For security reasons, her name has been changed.
Child abuse from an early age, probably around 6 or 7, by multiple relatives.
Elena had never been in group care before. She had never been in foster care before.
Growing up from that child abuse to later on, she learned this is how I survive in the world. So promiscuity in teenage years, using drugs, finding ways to get accepted.
Elena came to our safe home when she was 15 years old in the middle of the night. Elena was scared and sad and missed home where her younger sister was.
One day she had a call made out to us, not because she thought she needed help, but because other adults who saw that abuse and that hurt reported it.
Elena was very scared, and throughout the night, our safe home staff were able to talk to her and listen while she expressed her fears for her sister and what it meant for her to be away from home.
One More Child Anti-Trafficking is set apart in that We have a very relational style that collaborates among peer-to-peer survivor mentorship and the clinical side that's so needed.
The relationship is everything. You know, I can give you all the resources and on all the, food and clothing and housing, but if you don't trust me, then we're not really gonna get far. I kind of think of it how Jesus pursues us. We love because he first loved us. It takes him pursuing us first to understand what that looks like, to have that modeled for us. Being that consistent person is really what our program is about. I got carried to have some really deep, not just emotional and mental breakthroughs, but spiritual breakthroughs.
We're water on a rock. My prayer is that the Lord will soften their hearts towards him because he is our true hope. So with Elena, we just saw tremendous growth. While she was in our program, she committed her life to Christ, and that's a huge win when we get to watch them get baptized. And that's my prayer for the girls, that they'll just find their comfort and their peace and their calm and their healing in him.
What we're about at One More Child is the one more child of that next generation and making sure that we're helping grow the generational and relational health of the survivor that we're working with so that can be passed on and so that their children will be less vulnerable. You know, this isn't just the one life in front of you. And so it at times looks like a bridge from not just the pain and suffering to healing, but from one culture to this whole new culture.
And in order to get them from point A to point B, there are 70 steps in between to get them there, maybe more. And so not handhold them, but empower them, encourage them that they can make it to point B and that we will be there, but that they can do it because they're capable.
This is not something that direct service providers can do alone. We need the community. Even if you've never met a person who's been trafficked or exploited, this is a community problem. It affects all of us, and we need everyone to get involved. Together, we really can make a beautiful, healing, diverse community of multiple cultures where survivors of trafficking can just have the choice of what life they want and opportunities to get there.
Love that. So well put together. Thank you, Krista. I want to turn back to you now, Micah. Wow, the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking has done so much. I know that you guys have been successful. You've been able to look at the big picture and see where there are gaps, where services are needed, including opening up, I think in the United States, the first safe home for male survivors who have been trafficked. And I know that you're doing this super interesting project, this outreach online, where we're learning that most of the sex traffickers, the majority of them, are selling their victims online. They're advertising them online. And they're just not saying, hey, I'm a trafficker, go buy this person. That's it almost looks like a prostitution type issue when in fact these women are being trafficked forcefully and against their will. Tell us more about that and about some of the outreach that you all are doing.
Okay. One thing I just wanted to mention that I know Keith addressed the Super Bowl bringing in traffickers, and one thing that we often fail to mention is the demand side. So not only traffickers are coming into town, but also buyers. So this works hand in hand with our initiative from a technology perspective, to not only reach victims during the Super Bowl, but also reach out to buyers with the message, don't come to Tampa and exploit our children and vulnerable adults. So yes, we have a safe home for boys, for child victims of sex trafficking, and I really appreciate the partnership with One More Child and their desire to address some of the myths that we see in our society when it comes to the trafficking of children, that it's only happening to girls, when in fact we know that boys are being trafficked, and we have story after story about children that come into our home that were trafficked off of gaming sites, were recruited by traffickers, but also selling themselves for survival. So these are homeless youth that are just trying to look for a better life and support themselves. So we have the privilege of being able to serve these children. 10 to 17 is what we're licensed for in the state of Florida. And Florida Department of Children and Families has reported in their OPAGA report over the last couple years that over 100 children have been identified in the state of Florida, verified trafficking victims that are males.
You wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
I know we're talking so much about the Super Bowl, and it's so timely to really shine a light on such a dark crime. But how do you think these efforts that USAD is doing year-round are making a dent in the trafficking business?
So we mentioned, you asked about technology, and so we're fortunate in that we have some technology that we can use. I mentioned fighting the demand, but first I'll address your question about identifying victims. So we're able to scrape numbers off of sex sites. So during the Super Bowl, we do this year-round in different communities across the country, but we find that the events are bringing buyers to the area to purchase our children for sex. So how do we reach out and to those victims, those potential victims? So we're able to scrape numbers off of sex sites, and we mass text those numbers and just offer help. If you need help of any kind, we're here to connect you to resources in the area. So as traffickers bring their victims to different cities that are hosting big events like the Super Bowl, they'll be bringing in victims, not only victims within our city, but we will be providing opportunities to point them toward resources. And we have probably a dozen organizations in the area that are committed to pointing victims and potential victims, people that are caught up in the sex industry, point them toward resources.
I love that. Together we are strong.
Yes,
It is a web
Amen.
of resources, as I've been learning while working with some of these agencies, including yours. Keith, I want to toggle back to you. Anyone that knows anything about Hope Street knows that there's one big common denominator, it seems, with the young people and the families that you all are helping and ministering to, and that is poverty. How does poverty play a role in youth being more susceptible? You touched on this earlier, but just a little deeper. How does poverty connect or make children, if they're poor, more vulnerable to trafficking?
Thank you for that question. One of the things that Krista brought up earlier is this piece around trauma. Poverty, especially for kids that have experienced numerous bouts of trauma, can be another added layer of trauma to youth. Having resiliency to kind of deal with the everyday issues of life. And then Micah pointed this piece about survival. Many of these youth are looking for survival opportunities. And when a trafficker presents an opportunity to make money, to provide them with a better life, they take that as an opportunity to have a better life. And it becomes bait for them, especially when they've been systemically in poverty, that their life is day to day, they're not sure where that next meal is going to come from. Many times they want to take that into their own hands, and then a trafficker presents that as a bait and a means or an escape out of poverty. So that's why resources, we talked about having a comprehensive approach to serving those who have been victims and those who are at risk of being victims. There needs to be a concentrated effort, especially in communities that are impoverished, because again, these are targeted areas for those who are traffickers that are looking for those who could be potential victims.
Specifically, what can people in the community do to help? And with that, are there things they should and should not be doing when they're trying to help?
Yes, I would say this. One of the things that I really try to say to those who want to try to mitigate trafficking, a lot of times we see adverse behavior as a reflection of victims of trafficking. But I always say that it's not a reflection of those youth or those that are vulnerable for trafficking, but it's a response to trauma. So awareness is so key. Many times we see, and specifically for Hope Street, we serve youth in a juvenile delinquency system. Research has just shown you that institutionalized youth are more prone to be victims of sex trafficking or human trafficking. So those are youth that are in the juvenile delinquency system. Those are youth that are in foster care systems. And many times we put the onus on those youth for the situations that they find themselves in. But many times those are just responses to trauma. Those could also be cries for help. Many times we think that because they are finding themselves in juvenile detention centers, that they want to be there, they've made a mistake, that they want to be there, but it's a means of escape from the one that's trafficking them. So really understanding the warning signs of those that are potential victims. Here's a twofold kind of issue with institutions like foster care and the juvenile delinquency system. They can also be recruitment grounds for victims of trafficking, but they can also be places where youth are really trying to find a means of escape. I'm trying to get away from the person that trafficked me. So the reason that I'm stealing, the reason why I'm presenting adverse behavior is because I'm trying to get away from the one who trafficked me. So I think awareness is key. I also think advocacy is key. I think we have to look at the decriminalization of victims. Many times we say that we're going to punish the behavior, but again, is this a response to trauma? And then I also think there has to be a comprehensive approach. It's not only the organizations that are fighting against human trafficking, but it also has to be the church. We have to step in. We need mentors for these youth and those that are vulnerable. We need advocacy. We need legislation changes to support victims of trafficking. We can also provide, connect and partner with agencies that are providing employability training, financial literacy, because again, poverty and getting into trafficking, there's a direct correlation. So if we can provide them with a better means of providing just resources for themselves, I think that's critical as well.
So well said. I'm learning so much tonight. So glad to be here. Krista, just playing off of what Keith just said, again, rounding back to the Super Bowl, we're going to see a spike, unfortunately, going to see a spike in trafficking. How do the programs and the services that are being offered by Hope Street increase kind of like the protective, I want to almost call it like a protective bubble, the protective factors for potential victims?
Absolutely. And you know, the protective factors, there's 5 well-known protective factors to decrease vulnerabilities in youth and young adults overall, but specifically tonight we're talking about for at-risk youth to trafficking. And centers like Hope Street and the work that we're doing at One More Child are just foundational to that, instilling the protective factors, not just into the youth that we serve, but also into the community. So of 5 protective factors, 4 of them really happen outside of the home. You have concrete support in times of need. That can be everything from tangible to intangible support. A center like Hope Street and the collaboration among organizations like us and Micah and many other organizations throughout the state of Florida, that's critical to that concrete support. At Loft 181, it's not just clothes, like Tara said. It's concrete support that decreases the vulnerability, that gives more people who care, instilling into that life. Another protective factor is developmental knowledge specifically for parents and caregivers. But Keith really hit on something that, we see trauma responses like anger and aggression and criminal behaviors often. We see them as acting out or misbehavior. And when we start to look at the protective factors and places like Hope Street, One More Child is able to not just educate the youth that are coming, but educate the parents, educate the community that, these behaviors are not a choice often that the youth is making. They're trauma responses. And developmentally, they're actually appropriate trauma responses that, if you are being trafficked and harmed every day, or you're in need of survival, basic needs for survival, it is absolutely developmentally normal as a teenager that you would fight and aggressively pursue your own survival. And so when we can start to look at the protective factors and the work that One More Child's doing through Hope Street, through Loft 181, through our foster care, through our single moms, and through our anti-trafficking, we can look at it very holistically, that we are meeting the concrete needs in times of support. We are instilling that emotional resilience that's important into the youth directly, and we're also educating the community so that when, as community members, whether, in the education or in our churches especially, that we don't see youth that we would have, traditionally and historically called with behavior problems, we see it as trauma, and we stop asking, why are you doing that? Why are you acting that way? And instead we ask, what happened to you, and how can we help? How can we stand beside you? And we even start to, as Dr. Pam Whitaker, Vice President of Programs, always says, we just help to redirect the way that it's seen. And we start to think, yes, this child is showing aggression and anger, but for the life that they have when they go home from one of our programs or before coming into foster care, that anger and aggression may be the exact thing that protects them. And so we start to help them see that some of the things that people have looked at as weaknesses and has negative things are actually strengths. They're positive. They need to be redirected, and that's the work that all of us up here are doing every day through direct services.
Wow, thank you so much. Tara, back to you. And I just have to say personally that the little I've known of you and the few interactions I've had with you, I've looked at you as nothing less than a superhero. You just don't, your cape, I don't know, your cape's in the trunk of your car, maybe your husband's holding it for you. But you, I think a lot of people in the audience, a lot of people watching could absolutely identify you. You are a person who had a heart for people, very connected to your church, of course, and you knew that there was a need to just wrap some love, wrap arms around this vulnerable community. Talk to us about because I think a lot of people could relate to your story. Talk to us what it was like, how you went from average citizen to the founder, the overseer, the protector of Loft 181.
So thank you for that really kind plug, but no, I'm still a regular citizen. So I went to a panel much like this, and there weren't many people there, and I remember thinking, God, why am I here? And I remember hearing about things that were going on in our city, and things like sex trafficking, human trafficking, things like what was going on in foster care. And by the time, I just thought, man, okay, now I'm aware. I can't walk away. Now I'm accountable, But I also remember thinking at the time I had 5 children. Now I have 7. And I remember thinking, Lord, surely you're not asking me. Where do I go? What do I do? What do I have to offer? And I just remember God putting on my heart, figure out where I'm at work and then join me there. And so I started looking around and I started hearing about what was going on in our city. And this was not happening in third world countries. This was not happening just on Hollywood movies. This was happening in my city. This was happening at my kids' schools. These were happening with my kids' friends. But I didn't know that. And so I just started praying, God, what can I do? And so I went to my church, and I went to our missions department and said, I have an idea. I don't even know if it's going to work, but I need to do something. And so I prayed, I had an idea, and that's where we came up with Loft 181. And the number 181 is not just a random number, but at the time, it was the number of teenage girls in foster care between the ages of 13 and 17 in Hillsborough County. And I wanted girls to know you're not alone. And so our missions department gave me some racks so I could hang clothes on. And then I started inviting and meeting with guardian ad litems that advocate for kids in the court system. And I started meeting with caseworkers and people working in foster care. And I started meeting with safe homes and saying, hey, if this is a need, I'd like to help meet this need. And clothes for girls are important, keeps them in school, which teaches them skills. They feel like they have something to offer. And so we wanted, girls can be bullied by what they have or don't have. Unfortunately, it's just a sad world we live in. But I also see it can be so sad to think about all of this going on, but God is at work, and I'm so encouraged. And our goal, I think everybody on the panel, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job. I mean, that is our heartbeat. I don't want to be doing this. I want every kid in a family, a godly family. I want every person to have their needs met. I want every person prayed for. But I feel like it's going to take all of us. It is not just the Green Berets of Christians or the Green Berets of the community. It isn't. It's just normal, everyday, regular people, a mom of 5 who felt like, God, I don't even know where to start. And God was like, trust me, stay in step with me. And so I just said, okay. The funny thing is I laugh all the time that God has me doing something in clothes and helping meet physical, tangible needs, because I got this shirt at Target today because I've got groceries and a shirt. I really am not even very good at clothes. The funny thing is, but it doesn't matter. I think heart is what matters, and a desire to help. And so there's lots of opportunities and ways to get involved.
Well, let's just say this. You're very good at the clothes that matter.
Sweet, thank you. Girls are good at picking out their own clothes, I have learned. So I'm thankful for that.
Michael, you touched on it earlier, but I wanted to come back to this. That is because I was there, in the office watching a volunteer and watching one of your staff members, Natalie Ken, running the program, the software program to actually stop the demand. Because when people say, well, how are you using computers and the internet to stop people from buying sex? Briefly tell us how that works.
Yeah, so we're able to use technology again the bad guys use it. So we're able to counteract that with some technology on our own part, where we can identify and target market to buyers through social media. So based off of someone's social media profile, we can tell if they're engaged in sex buying activities. And so with that information, we push out ads to really point them toward resources, because we're talking, trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world today. It's a $150 billion industry. The traffickers are brokers. They're just trying to make money. It's the simple equation of supply and demand. If we can cut out the demand, we can stop the victimization on the front end, and then we'll all be put out of business because they're gonna go find other work. And that's what we want them to do. So there's dozens of buyers for every trafficker and every victim out there. So how do we target these buyers? Through awareness, right, in our communities.
You're messaging them.
And through the technology to point them toward resources to get help for their sex and porn addictions.
Those commercials, or PSAs, I should say, are really powerful. They show a man on the edge of a bed, and his wife is behind him, and he's saying, "I never thought she would find out." And they're just very convicting messages that populate in the profiles of these people that an algorithm has indicated would most likely to be buyers of sex or buyers of pornography. So, so well done, so exciting to see, when they go high-tech, you go high-tech, so love that. Well, I think we're getting ready to wrap up, and who better to end it with than Krista? And you're going to give us some final remarks.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot tonight about the year-round problem. We've talked about how this hits boys and girls, so this is not just a female problem. We've talked about the need to address all sides, from direct care for the victims, for preventative measures for at-risk youth, and for hitting the demand side. And, we want to end not just with information for you. We want to end saying we desperately need you. We need you to get involved. We need you to go home and yes, pray, but we need you to also pray thoroughly and quickly and take action. We're asking for a call to action for comfort kits. We're going to play a video, and then after the video, I really want to just paint a small picture of how these comfort kits address the problem and are a benefit to the survivors that we hope to reach during this critical time.
99.9 million people watched last year's Super Bowl in the United States. But did you also know an estimated 11,000 underage youth were trafficked illegally for sex in the United States as well? It's a daunting statistic, but it's one our organization is working actively to change. In the time it takes you to watch a Super Bowl commercial, you can send an emergency comfort kit to a trafficked child in need. Simply go here, select 5 to 10 items from the wish list, and know that you are sending comfort to a child who needs to know someone cares. Help us by being a champion for children this Super Bowl Sunday.
And, I want it to hit home that while these seem like tangible items, my story matches so many of the survivors we see today. And when we come into care, it's common, like my own story, that every counselor, every mentor wants to talk about our sex-related trauma, and what people think is that's the most pertinent thing that's upsetting us or angering us. And I was a full-grown adult, 29 years old, when I came into care and started the healing process. And I just kept telling my counselor, the stuff that makes me sad, and 18 years later, the stuff that will still bring tears to my eyes, is not the being trafficked. While it was horrendous, it's the not having underwear at 12 years old. It's the going to school and having to ask kids in your class if they had a shirt you could wear tomorrow, or if they had food that you could, have for to take home, if anyone had snacks to send home with you. And these comfort kits, they meet that tangible need that very much like Keith was hitting on. Poverty is a trauma in and of itself, but it also is what someone once called a little trauma. That doesn't mean it's little on the impact. It means it's every day, it's everywhere we go. And when we meet youth and young adults, both boys and girls, through this Super Bowl, and we're able to intervene, to be able to give them something immediately that decreases their survival needs, that's a huge impact. And it just like my memories this many years later of the things that I had to beg for and how embarrassing and sad it was, those tangible needs being met will stay in the memories of the youth that we meet for years. And the second thing that we want to just call you to action over the comfort kits is oftentimes, and again, like my own story, when you come into care, we see people that culturally of any race, they dress differently than the culture that we often, not always, but that we often come from when we come from extreme poverty and, families and communities with high levels of trauma, drug addiction, alcoholism. And so when we come into care and we see people dressed very much like all of us up here, we often have been taught from very young that those are people who, what did a young person just said to me the other day, those are the people who take children. They dress like this, the people who take children. And I have memories that, came back to really haunt me later when I came into care, meeting people dressed professionally, business casual, looking just, like they have somewhat functional lives. And it would come back to me walking in and out of like maybe a store or a gas station when I was in my trauma and in the drug addiction. And I remember the look on their eyes. And even if I hadn't been exposed to cultural norms to be afraid of functional adults in our society, I still would have remembered the look in their eyes that just said, ew, like, what's wrong with you? And when we give the comfort kits, it's our team giving the comfort kits to trafficking survivors. But we get to share that they come from the community, that we didn't ourselves put this together, that this was a collaboration. And in these comfort kits, these are, people who are working class American citizens who just care. They don't have a reason that you would think they have to care, they just do. And so those comfort kits get to tear down some of that separation of cultures. And when they do come into care, we get to also then, bring them to the program or introduce them to services and say, these people are very much like the people who put together those comfort kits for you. Because whether you see it or not, there's a community out there who does care about you.
So powerful. Just a final note, how can people that are watching, what's the fastest way for them to get information and to get connected if they want to help out? What's the website?
Go to onemorechild.org. We have information that's been on the screen, and we will have information for you that lets you see, first and foremost, how to learn more. We need educated communities ready to get involved, and so there's great information on there. Requesting a training or an awareness event from any size in any part of the community. This is not something that we just need isolated portions of our community to want to learn about. So anywhere from your job to the place where you live, call us, get a hold of us, go online and request a training. And then we have a text to give, and we have a give donate button, and we do need financial support. It is expensive to care for youth. It's expensive to wrap that care around, and we need your partnership in all ways. And then we also ask you to quickly go out and answer that call to action with the comfort kits. The Super Bowl is coming up right away, and we need to be ready. So while we need support year-round, we especially need the comfort kits to come in a timely manner where we can get them out to those in need.
Thank you so much. Before we turn it over to Tara for closing prayer, I just want to share on a personal note, I had the opportunity to meet with, about 2 weeks ago, about 10 days ago, I met with a young woman in Sarasota. Her name is Kimberly. Kimberly was rescued a few years ago. She was trafficked by her trafficker for 3 years. She was beaten mercilessly. She didn't know from one day to the next if she would be woken up with a punch or a kick or a kiss. And she credits wholeheartedly the nonprofits, just like those sitting up here, for rescuing her. It wasn't law enforcement that got her out. Sure, they arrested her trafficker, but it wasn't law enforcement that rescued her as a human being. They may have rescued her from her trafficker, but she could have easily fallen right back into addiction or right with another trafficker. For 5 years now, she has been clean because of nonprofits just like those sitting up here. She doesn't think she would be alive if it wasn't for the nonprofits that are doing the work behind the enforcement efforts of law enforcement. It was an honor to be among you, and I learned so much, and I'm sure everyone watching did. So thank you for your time. And Tara, if you would close us in prayer.
Join me. Father, thank you so much for just enlightening us tonight. God, helping us to learn something new. God, but will you prompt our hearts for where you want us to get involved and how we can be a part of this? These are your girls. God, may we be on mission to go get them, to tell them that they are loved, that you have a purpose and a plan for their life. God, I pray that you stir up compassion for vulnerable youth in our community. Jesus, will you just burden our hearts for it? Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hands that desire to help. God, I pray for the Super Bowl coming up, and while there is so much excitement and a lot of fun to be had, God, we thank you and we celebrate that. But God, we know that is not the case for everyone. So Jesus, I pray, God, against any evil that is happening in our city or plans for evil, God, I pray that you will shine light. You will bring attention. God, I pray for justice for traffickers. God, and I pray for mercy for their victims. God, you are a God of justice and mercy. And so, God, we cry out for both of those qualities from you, Jesus, in our city. God, and I pray as we join together, God, you will just help us as we provide for vulnerable youth and for girls and for guys. God, just ignite our hearts for where you are at work. Open our eyes. Jesus, we long to be in partnership with you. Thank you for the work that is being done. Will you bless those that desire to help? God, help us to be adults that point to you first and foremost. We love you and thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. In your name we pray. Amen.
Pastor Paul, I think you might have a couple of final thoughts.
I sure do. Would you join me in saying thank you to these panelists? What an incredible time. Informative, and in one sense, it's heartbreaking. In another sense, it's so encouraging to know that people like you and ministries like these that you've heard from are making a difference, even right here in this community. If you're watching from somewhere other than our Mission Hill family, I, as a local church pastor, just want to commend to you these ministries that you see here. These are partners with us, not just for this event, but ongoing partners. One More Child and the Institute Against Human Trafficking, a part of ministry that we do year-round. And I would encourage you to check out these websites and get in on what God is doing through their ministries. If you're a part of our church family, whether you're in the room or online, I want to encourage you to take advantage of the way we're coming alongside and being a part of this Super Bowl event. Our goal as a church here at Mission Hill is to provide 150 of these comfort bags to those folks that are going through this. And so you've got resource both here locally on the seats if you're in the room, and then certainly you can find that online if you're not. But thank you again for being a part of this. Thank you guys for encouraging, educating, and just edifying the body in this area. And I would just encourage us to do what Tara led us in doing as we go through this next week and a half. And don't negate the power of prayer as we head toward the Super Bowl. And let's ask God to change that statistic this year, to bring that number down, because the body of Christ is really raising up and making a difference. Thank you so much. God bless you. I pray that as you leave this evening, you go in the knowledge that our God is sovereign. He's not caught off guard by these events. Go surrounded by the grace of Jesus Christ and filled with the Holy Spirit of God. Good night. God bless.